Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so happy that you and feel really privileged that you've chosen to make me part of your day by tuning in to my programs on church history. I'm your show's host, Dr. Richard Allinger of the Newburgh Theological Seminary, Department of Theology, Division of Church History. And I first of all want to say to you, Happy Reformation Day. Now, for those of you who, because it's October, for those of you who do not know this, October 31st, 1517, about 501, 502, 503 years ago, Dr. Martin Luther, a Roman Catholic priest, posted 95 theses or indictments against his Roman mother church, the Roman Catholic Church, on the University of Wittenberg's doors, launching the Protestant Reformation, the historic 16th century Protestant Reformation. And ever since that historic event happened, for the last 503 years, the world over, especially among the Reformed churches all over the world, there's Reformed churches all over the world, and they have for the last 503 years celebrated Reformation Day. It would never, you would never pass October 31st without in your circles really celebrating that day, especially if it was on the Lord's Day on Sunday. They would have quite a big hoopla over this event. Paul, could you hand me that blue book up there with the red rubber band around it? Now, it's not just among the Reform circles, because this National School Calendar 2016 to 2018, and the Flint Public Schools actually, when September rolls around and the semester begins, they actually buy these National School Calendars by the Regal Press out in Davison, by Whitey's Fish and Chips over the railroad tracks there. And they supply these to Mott College too. And if you open up to October 13th, it says Reformation Day. So it hasn't really been forgotten. It's just that, well, what is Halloween? Because I don't think, Halloween fell on October 31st too, the same day as Reformation Day. And with that being said, I did a little research and I found out that Halloween is a religious holiday belonging to the Roman Catholic Church. And the holiday is, Halloween means to the Roman Catholic Church All Hallows Day or All Saints Day. And that always falls on October 31st. And it was a papal decree in 1745 purposely to minimize Reformation Day. So the Pope doesn't want, he'd like people just to forget about the Reformation, that it never even happened. So he decreed about 200 years after Martin Luther started the Reformation movement, in 1745, a papal decree actually decreed it a religious holiday, Halloween, on 10/31, on the 31st day of October, the same day that Reformation Day goes on. And just like I told you in the last session, that as soon as the Reformation movements got launched, the Pope back in the 16th century appointed Ignatius of Loyola to found the Jesuits to counteract everything the Reformation movement was doing. So he also, the papal decree in 1745, by making October 31st what he calls Halloween or All Saints Day, has taken away or some of the impact of what really the Reformation was all about. And hopefully maybe the Pope would like everybody to forget the 95 Theses that Dr. Martin Luther wrote, the indictments against the Roman Catholic Church. And like I said, for the last 500 years, the world over, especially among the Reformed churches the world over on all 7 continents, they've always observed October 31st as the Reformation Day, big celebration. And here in the national school calendars in Flint Public Schools here in Michigan, they even have October 31st in these calendars here for the teachers, for their desk calendar. October 31st as Reformation Day. So as you see October 31st approaching, let me say to you again, Happy Reformation Day. And because most Protestants in this post-Christian, postmodern culture, which is in a dangerous secular drift away from biblical principles, have forgotten what they were even protesting. And they no longer celebrate October 31st as Reformation Day amongst all the Protestant mainline denominations. But instead, they usually have like Happy Halloween hot dog handouts or other candy giveaway treats or trunk or treat in their parking lots. Some kids even dress up in costumes. And for children, for the children, they do this in their churches on October 31st with no mention of Dr. Martin Luther and the historic 16th century Reformation amongst their church fellowships. And there's some more, yet there's another more scripturally observant Christians in our community that cannot, in good Christian conscience, participate in the Halloween observance. So has not to upset too many people in the neighborhood with regard to the trick-or-treaters that might come for a candy treat or an apple or something at your door on Halloween night. These more observant Christians just buy scripture verse pencils like John 3:16, for God so loved the world, or Hebrews chapter 12, verse 14, without holiness no man shall see the Lord. And they take these scripture verse pencils and wrap a little typed note on the pencil when the trick-or-treater comes to the door, and puts that pencil in their bag with a note that just says, we cannot in good Christian conscience observe Halloween because we see it as a pagan holiday, something that we don't care to participate in. And as a token of goodwill, they don't have the kids go off the porch without giving them anything, but they want the trick-or-treaters to be reminded of the scriptures and the Lord Jesus Christ and salvation and sanctification, justification and glorification and biblical principles, so they put that in their bag. That was, so again, I will say to you, it falls on the same day. Happy Reformation Day, everybody. That's October 31st. And also, in the last session, has a sequel to the last 3 sessions that I have been talking to you about the Roman Catholic Church and the Protestant denominations, and looking at the emerging church of the 21st century. And I would like you to, I even referred to World War II's, during Nazi Germany, there was a man named Dietrich Bonhoeffer that was an underground Bible college teacher in Nazi Germany, and he was involved with a network of people to assassinate Adolf Hitler. And he got caught before the war ended. And just before they took him to the gallows to hang him, he was hearing the Allied troops coming in on a gray morning, April 1945, when he was hung by a rope till dead, because he got caught in a plot to assassinate Hitler before the war ended. But him being on death row, heard the Allied troops bombing, and he thought they might break him out of that prison, Flossenburg, before they killed him. But Hitler wanted everybody involved in that plot to be killed, their families, wives, children, and all of them. And so his life was ended before the war ended. And has a sequel to understand that which I've talked with you about, because Dietrich Bonhoeffer, before he died at a young 33, 34 years old, he wanted to go to America and London and Rome and other places in the world, because he was part of the confessing church that didn't cave in to the apostate Third Reich in Nazi Germany. And he even mentioned going to Rome before he went back to Germany. He wanted to go back to Germany because he believed that the Father in heaven was calling him to actually lay his life down with regard to ending Hitler's reign in the Third Reich. So he came, people in America wanted him to stay there, and in London too, he was offered positions, but he wanted to go back and die for his Lord there in obedience. He saw that as the obedience to the Lord's will, that he even wrote a book about the cost of discipleship and how Christ calls us to come and die with him for his sake in this earth. Remember what Jesus said, if you lose your life for my sake, you shall find it. And that's what Dietrich Bonhoeffer did. And so has a sequel to all that I was talking about. It would behoove you to, again, go to YouTube. And after World War II ended, there was a man named Billy Graham. He was an evangelist. And he was a very impactful evangelist, starting back after World War II ended all the way up until he died. He was almost 100. He was 98 when he died, I think back in 2016. And to understand what happened was Billy Graham became very famous, holding big crusades from the end of World War II time up to our time right now, before he died. But in his popularity amongst people and even world government leaders of different countries, he started drifting toward the Roman Catholic Church's Pope's ecumenical movement, which really rubbed some of the evangelicals, especially the conservative evangelical conservatives, many Baptists, the wrong way. And they couldn't see eye to eye no more with evangelist Billy Graham. His time went on, and there was quite a division between the evangelicals, the Protestant mainline denominational leaders, many of them of the conservative stitch, because there's many stripes of Christians, and some conservatives, because there's an array of belief and unbelief between atheism, neo-orthodoxy, orthodoxy, conservative, and liberal thinking and theological interpretation of the scriptures and so on. And some of them just didn't agree with what Billy was doing, warming up to the Pope a little, and becoming more ecumenical. And that's why he to fell out with some of the people in the 20th century evangelicals. And you would never think that evangelist Billy Graham would fall out with some of the Baptist leaders, but he did. Because of his warming up to Roman Catholicism. And to understand that whole movement and what happened, and to understand the impact that the evangelist Billy Graham had on Christendom of the 20th century, You might want to go to YouTube. It has a sequel to what I have been talking about for the last 3 sessions, and put in the search box John MacArthur on Billy Graham, and he explains it perfectly, what caused the fallout between Billy Graham and a lot of the evangelicals. A lot of them affirmed him, but a lot of them didn't see eye to eye with him. And again, go to YouTube if you really want to understand that better. John MacArthur does a superb job explaining perfectly what I have been talking to you about Billy Graham. And again, go to the YouTube search box and put John MacArthur on Billy Graham, and he'll explain it to you more clearly than I have kind of haltingly kind of related this to you. And now, because toward the last month session in September, we talked about Dietrich Bonhoeffer going to Rome and how he kind of got pain in his heart as he looked at St. Peter's after he was there for a week or two, and he felt a pain in his heart when he looked at St. Peter's for the last time. He wrote in some of his books and journals, and just hopped on a trolley car and went back to Berlin. And so there is a book called, published in 2010 by Eric Metaxas, who is a Christian radio program host on many of radio networks, and even on television slots, Christian TV, Eric Metaxas, and he wrote a book in 2010 called Bonhoeffer, Pastor, Prophet, Martyr, and Spy. And I'm just going to read to you some excerpts out of that book to kind of familiarize you with this man, Dietrich Bonhoeffer. The first chapter was the family and childhood of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. The rich world of his ancestors set the standards for Dietrich Bonhoeffer's own life. It gave him a certainty of judgment and manner that cannot be acquired in a single generation. Now, remember that the Reformation movement since Martin Luther, the last 503 years, is a movement, and it's generational, and it will continue every generation until Christ returns. And so he grew up in a family that believed the essence of learning lay not in a formal education, but in the deeply rooted obligation to be guardians of a great historical heritage and intellectual tradition. In chapter 1 of this book, we learn that Dietrich's childhood, the Bonhoeffers rarely went to church. Their faith, and in the book there's a picture of Dietrich. He's one of 8 children, him and his mother and dad, and his brothers and sisters. And I believe all of Dietrich and his brothers were, I think 4 of them, were all killed during World War II, and he was assassinated toward its end too for trying to assassinate Hitler. And Bonhoeffer, the young man, was encouraged to make the church live out what it claimed to believe by speaking publicly against Hitler and the Nazis and taking actions against them. After the war deaths of several Bonhoeffer cousins, the younger members of the family would often lie in bed at night and talk about death and eternity. 2 weeks after being called to serve in the war, Walter, his older brother, died of shrapnel wound. Meanwhile, Carl Frederick, his other brother, was still in the infantry, and soon 17-year-old Klaus, his other brother, was also called to serve. It was too much, we read. Their mother collapsed and stayed in bed for weeks. Whenever death happens in families, this is what happens. There's Dietrich, his dad, and all of his brothers, little Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and all of his dad and his brothers. And in 1919, following the German Revolution, the Allies demanded that Germany give up many of its territories. What's more, the Germans were ordered to eviscerate their military. In 1920, Bonhoeffer announced that he had chosen theology over music as his life's pursuit, against the wishes and expectations of family and friends. Not everyone reacted to his choice with grace. Among the academic elite of which he was part, the study of theology and the profession of a theologian were not highly respected. Now, there was a city in Germany called Tübingen, and like, you know how you say Uber, like Uber, if you want to call somebody on Uber to get a ride through a city, if you don't have a car, you call Uber. Well, this U in German, Uber is a German word, and the way you pronounce this city is like that U in Uber, is Tübingen. And from the time I was 13 years old, it was clear to me that I would study theology, said Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Significant changes came in 1923 for the Bonhoeffers, including the first marriage among the children, Ursula. The eldest daughter married Rudiger Schlesinger, and a brilliant lawyer. His father had been a friend and classmate of Karl Bonhoeffer at Tübingen. Rudiger studied there too and had joined the legal fraternity of which Karl Bonhoeffer was a distinguished past member. When he paid a visit to this famous alumnus in Berlin, he met his wife. Chapter 3 is called A Roman Holiday. In 1924, the universality of the church was illustrated in a marvelously effective manner. White, black, yellow members of religious orders, everyone was in clerical robes, united under the church. It truly seemed ideal, said Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Because of the distaste for France and England engendered by the war and Versailles, traveling to Italy became especially popular among Germans. But for Klaus and Dietrich Bonhoeffer, it was a cultural and ancestral pilgrimage of a lifetime. And here's a picture of Dietrich with some of his, on Thursday evening, they would have about 7 p.m. a Thursday circle, they called it, of young men that he mentored. He was a mentor for young men in Germany before he was killed in this underground seminary. That's a picture of him with some of the young men he mentored. Bonhoeffer spun through Rome like a cyclone when he visited Rome. Before, I told you he went to America, London, and Rome. There's different places he went to visit, but he always wanted to go back. He felt he was called of God to go and die for Christ's sake in Nazi Germany, even though people tried to get him to stay there, but he was called to die there. And he wasn't, he wanted, and they say after he laid his life down, the chaplain that saw him hung by the rope said, he died well. Of all the people I saw die at the hands of the Gestapo, he died well, just like Jesus did, praying, not my will, Father, but thy will be done. Bonhoeffer always talked about praying to the Father like Jesus in Gethsemane to make sure the Father's will gets done in your life. Absorbing as much of its culture as possible. Writing a detailed account in his diary the 18-year-old Bonhoeffer wrote on the Colosseum, this building has such power and beauty that from the moment one sees it, one knows one has never seen nor been able to imagine anything like it. Antiquity is not completely dead. I sat there for almost an hour. The enamored 18-year-old Bonhoeffer continued to write on the choir at St. Peter's, the Christus Factus and the Benedictus and the Miserere, songs that were sung. Psalm 50 was set to singing, and then the Benedictus was the verses out of Luke chapter 1 and 2 by the choir were simply indescribable. On the eunuch who sang the alto solos that day, there is something about the way they sing that is thoroughly inhuman, English, dispassionate, and united with a peculiar rapturous ecstasy.
One minute, Richard.
Okay. In the last minute, I'm just going to show you a picture of Dietrich on a boat, transatlantic, going over to New York City from Germany, Europe, to visit America. And we'll talk about what he found in Harlem, some churches there that he wanted to buy all the records in all the record shops to get those choirs that were singing in these Augustinian churches around Harlem. He really liked that music. And so I'll get back with you in the next session. I hope you get right back with me. Thank you.
Capture your future at Mott Community College.
If there be time to expose through discussion the falsehoods and the fallacies, the remedy to be applied is more speech, not enforced silence.
Public, educational, and governmental access television is such a remedy, providing every community with a forum for free expression. PEG Access empowers every voice to be heard. It's the freedom to communicate, and it's only on cable.
Well, I'm so glad you got back with me. I was talking about Bonhoeffer, young Bonhoeffer, visiting Rome and the Vatican. He was just enraptured with all that he saw, but he had to get back to Germany and die for Christ's sake there. What I want to share with you before I get back to what Bonhoeffer was doing in Nazi Germany, I was just telling Paul before this session started that I have bought several copies of this Read and Grow Picture Bible stories for children because it's hard for them to read the Bible. So these actually have pictures in them. And I have a great-grandson named Kingston. He'll be 6 years old in December. And back around September of 2019, we were in the family room, and this book was opened to Genesis chapter, Sin Enters the World, Genesis chapter 3. And it just says in these verses, there's a picture of Eve Eve is taking some fruit off of a tree, and then you can see the two eyes of a snake. And this was opened, and this little, 5-year-old great-grandson of mine, Kingston, he saw that snake, and he goes, "What's that?" Of anything he saw, I mean, there's a lot on this page. I mean, but his eye just went to that snake with his eyes, and he said, "What's that?" And I was so enamored to see him, so interested in that two eyes of that snake. And it just reads here that Eve answered, "We may eat the fruit of any tree in the garden except the tree in the middle of it. God told us not to eat from it or even touch it. If we do, we will die." And then the snake, the devil that Kingston saw, said, "But the serpent said, that's not true. You won't die. God just said that because he knows that when you eat it, you will be like him, knowing good and evil." So that's why I gave several of these copies to all my grandchildren, but I was just enamored the way that 5-year-old great-grandson of mine looked at the eyes of that snake and said, "What's that?" And then my other great-grandson, Isaiah will be 12 years old, October 20th. And I had been in the hospital with pneumonia, and he came to the hospital with his mother, Brittany, and he gave me this audio Bible because he knew that I'm deaf and I wear hearing aids, and I have glaucoma and I only have one eye, and he thought this would help me. And I was in critical condition in the hospital for 10 days, and he came in and said, he was 11 years old at the time, "Grandpa, don't worry, only believe. With God, all things are possible, and I've brought you this little audio Bible as a gift." And, I was laying there, and I pushed the button.
And he said,
This was when Moses, his wife Zipporah, had died, that he had the 2 Hebrew sons with. And he had married the Ethiopian woman, and Miriam, his Hebrew sister, and Aaron, his Hebrew brother, spoke against him marrying an Ethiopian out of the Hebrew lineage. And for doing that, the Lord turned them leprous, but he healed them because Moses prayed for the Lord's forgiveness for what they had done. And I thank my grandson. Thank you so much now, because I can now lay in the hospital bed and listen to the Bible with my hearing aid, because I've lost 70% of my hearing also. And I was just enamored about that too, and I wanted to share that with you about my great-grandson's encouraging me just to keep the faith, and with God all things are possible. Getting back to, by the way, I have 20 grandkids and 2 great-grandsons. I have yet to have a great-granddaughter, but I always showed them when they come over. This is I have a great-grandpa Robert, and on my dad's mother's side, and back around the time of World War I, he gave a copy of this. He whittled this with a knife and one piece of wood, and he made 4 of them, and he gave one to Woodrow Wilson. It's a cane with a woman's hand at the top of the cane, and all the grandkids, they see this great-grandparent had put a snake crawling up this stick. Has Moses raised a serpent up, the brazen serpent in the wilderness? He put a serpent on a stick, and has Moses lifted that stick up with the serpent on it, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up. And so maybe that's why my great-grandpa Robert, around the time when Woodrow Wilson was president, whittled with one piece of wood and a knife 4 of these canes with a snake crawling up, trying to get this woman's hand here at the top of the cane. See, there's a woman's hand right there, and then there's a snake crawling up trying to get the woman's hand. And one copy of this was given to Woodrow Wilson, and it's in his museum. I believe down in Missouri, the Woodrow Wilson Museum. Remember, Missouri was a border state during the Civil War, and during World War I, Woodrow Wilson, our president, was when the war started and ended in Woodrow Wilson's watch, and so my great-grandpa gave him a copy, and then he gave his daughter, that's my grandma, one, and this is it right here, and then he gave one of his sons and another daughter one of these also. I always share it with the grandkids when they come over. Now getting back to remember Dietrich Bonhoeffer, he at the Vatican, he was enraptured with the Sistine Chapel, and he said, I was hardly able to move beyond Adam on the Sistine Chapel. There is an inexhaustible abundance of ideas in the picture. The finger of God reverberates with colossal power and tender love, or rather with the divine attributes that supersede these 2 human attributes that are often far removed from each other. Man is about to awake to life for the first time. The meadow sends out shoots in front of an unending mountain ranges, thereby foreshadowing man's later fate. The painting, because they say that the clinging vines of sin, once Adam and Eve fell, they were ensnared and bound by the clinging vines of sin. But this is why the Lamb of God was to come into the world and die to rescue fallen man and woman from the clinging vines of sin. The meadow sends out shoots in front of unending mountain ranges, thereby foreshadowing man's later fate. The painting is very worldly and yet very pure. In short, one cannot express it. That's what Michelangelo did, the Pope of that time, of building the Sistine Chapel. Actually hired Michelangelo to put these up on the Sistine Chapel ceilings, mosaics, paintings on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Walking among the many, Michelangelo premier sculpts the young Bonhoeffer's favorite figure of all of them was Michelangelo's masterpiece, in that Jonah. Has, if to burnish his aesthetic credentials, he raved to his in his diary about this perspectival shortening, having grasped the essence of Michelangelo's work. So it went for months, yet the real significance of this trip for Dietrich Bonhoeffer lay not in the culture-broadening aspect as a mini grand tour or in its academic aspect as a semester abroad, but in its prompting his thoughts on that which he would ask and answer for the rest of his life. What is the church? Dietrich was a theologian with deep thoughts and always wondered, what is the church? What is it supposed to be? And this is a picture of his sister. He had a twin sister, one of 8 children, and this is one of the houses that the Bonhoeffers lived in, has a family right here. And walking, and then with regard to what is the church, in his diary, Bonhoeffer recorded that Palm Sunday was the first day that something of reality of Catholicism dawned on me. Nothing romantic or the like, but that rather that I am beginning, I believe, to understand the concept church. This new idea forming in the 18-year-old's mind that day in Rome would end up having profoundly significant ramifications. To think of the church as something universal would change everything and would set in motion the entire course of Bonhoeffer's remaining life. That is, the church's transcendence of race and national identity was in actual existence. Then its existence was not just in Germany or Rome, but beyond both. This glimpse of the church has something beyond the Lutheran Protestant Church of Germany, has a universal Christian community, was a revelation and an invitation to further thinking. What is the church? It was the question he would attack in his doctoral dissertation, Sanctorum Communio, and in his postdoctoral work, Active and Being, where he so eloquently concludes, Christ's universal Catholic Church, visible and invisible, is the totality of all the redeemed souls of mankind since the creation of man. And this was a picture of, in the book, of his mom and dad that had the 8 children in Germany. And like I said, his 4 brothers all died in World War II, and Dietrich was assassinated for trying to kill Hitler in a plot. But Bonhoeffer was no mere academic. For him, ideas and beliefs were nothing if they did not relate to the world of reality outside one's mind. Indeed, his thoughts on the nature of the church would lead him into the ecumenical movement in Europe, causing him to link hands with Christians outside Germany, and therefore to see instantly the lie at the heart of the so-called orders of creation theology, which linked the idea of the church with the German Volk. This idea of a church defined by racial identity and blood, which the Nazis would violently push and so many Germans tragically embraced, was anathema to the idea of the universal church. So it was on this Palm Sunday in Rome that Bonhoeffer's course was set in motion. Ideas had consequences, and this idea, now just budding, would flower in his opposition to the National Socialists and bear fruit in his involvement in the conspiracy to kill a human being. The openness that Bonhoeffer brought to this idea of the church and to the Roman Catholic Church was hardly typical of German Lutherans. For Dietrich, the theologian, to hold a prejudice in favor of Lutheranism or Protestantism or even Christianity would be wrong. One must consider every possibility and avoid predisposing oneself to where it would all lead. But another reason he was so open to the Catholic Church now had to do with Rome itself, the fulcrum of European culture and European life. And remember, I told you, the evangelist Billy Graham in the 20th century, after World War II ended, in all of his popularity, even with world leaders, warmed up to the Vatican. And this is where, you need to go to John MacArthur on Billy Graham on YouTube. John MacArthur on Billy Graham, because Billy Graham was quite ecumenical too, and that's what's the disconnect with a lot of evangelicals in the Protestant ranks when Billy Graham began to do this. A lot of people in the Protestant churches don't see eye to eye with what Billy Graham was doing, kind of warming up to Rome too, like Dietrich sees it too. Not bad. Warm up. But you see, a lot of these people are of the mind of the conservative stitch. Remember, I told you that Christianity is full of every stripe, and this particular stripe might be Orthodox conservative in their view, and you shouldn't be toward wrong doctrine, that unscriptural doctrine that the popes have espoused for over 1,000 years, and Billy Graham was doing that. And Dietrich seems to be toward ecumenicalism too before he was killed in Nazi Germany, but he clearly didn't see eye to eye with Rome, and he felt sick at heart when he left Rome for the last time before he went to die for Christ in Nazi Germany. A third reason for his, like I told you again, Mahatma Gandhi was living at this time too, before he was assassinated, when Hitler was rising to power. And Mahatma Gandhi wrote Hitler a letter, and he was only seen as a fifth columnist, journalist probably by the Third Reich. But he wrote and was talking about nonviolence and peace to Adolf Hitler. And so Gandhi, Dietrich wanted to visit Gandhi too before he died, about nonviolence, because he was seeing what was happening in Europe. And when Gandhi visited the churches, Christian churches in Europe before he was killed, he was not impressed at all with what he saw, which is a shame, because he could have really influenced the Muslims and the Hindus and Buddhists toward Christ, which he did. He thinks that all of the Muslims, Hindus, and Buddhists should read the teachings of Christ. That's what Gandhi said. But he didn't really like what he saw in Christianity in Europe. A third reason for his openness to Catholicism was encouraged by his tenure under Adolf Schlatter, often used theological texts that were traditionally used only by the Catholic theologians. Bonhoeffer had felt an innate desire to ecumenically draw these Catholic texts back into a larger Christian theological conversation. During Holy Week, now Holy Week to us, is in the Western Civ, is week of Passover when Christ died, Passion Week in Gethsemane, Via Dolorosa, and Mount Calvary, Golgotha, his death, and then his resurrection on Easter morning when he got up on the third day. He wondered during Holy Week, he wondered about the Reformation and whether it went wrong. When was it unintended? Whether it went wrong, or when it officially became a church, the Reformed Church, rather than simply remaining a sect. In a few years, this would become crucially important to him. When the Nazis were taking over the German Lutheran Church, he would lead the charge to break away and start the confessing church. That too was first considered a movement, a confessional movement, but then it became an official church. He would have much to do with its taking that direction. Bonhoeffer was already laying the intellectual groundwork for what he would face in Germany of the Third Reich, 10 years ahead. Bonhoeffer, writing in his diary, says, "I find I am once again much less sympathetic to Catholicism." Now, see, he didn't see eye to eye with them, and Billy Graham didn't really either, but they were warming up so much to the Pope and the Vatican that they fell out with some of the people in Christendom because of their proclivity toward Rome. Catholic dogma veils, now Bonhoeffer says, Catholic dogma veils every ideal thing in Catholicism without knowing that this is what it is doing. There is a huge difference between confession and dogmatic teachings about confession. Unfortunately, also between church and the church in dogmatics, he considered the union of both churches, the unification of Catholicism and Protestantism, is probably impossible, although it would do parties much good. Now, remember, I told you in the Muslim faith you have Shiites and Sunnis, and there's 4 different sects in Buddhism, and Hindus, thousands of sects, and there's always, like in this world, in religions, have always had these schisms and these splits, like the Roman Catholic split with the Protestants and so on. It's not new. And although it would do parties much good, in a few years he would incorporate the best of both into his Christian communities at Zingst and Finkenwalde, and be roundly criticized for it by many German Lutherans. Somehow, before the semester was over, Bonhoeffer got an audience with the Pope. Saturday audience with the Pope. Great expectations clashed. It was fairly impersonable and coolly celebrating. The Pope made a fairly indifferent impression on me. He lacked everything indicative of a Pope. All grandeur and anything extraordinary was missing. Sad that it had that effect on me. Before Bonhoeffer knew it, his glorious time in Rome was at an end. When I looked at St. Peter's for the last time, there was a pain around my heart, and I quickly got on the trolley car and left. 3 years later, Bonhoeffer led a discussion group called the Thursday Circle. It consisted of bright young men around 16 or 17 years of age. They covered many topics, and one week they discussed the Catholic Church, prompting Bonhoeffer to summarize his thoughts in the following short paper. It is hard to overestimate the importance of the Catholic Church's value for European culture and for the whole world. It Christianized and civilized barbaric peoples, and for a long time was the only guardian of science and art. Here, the Church's cloisters were preeminent. The Catholic Church developed a spiritual power unequaled anywhere, and today we still admire the way it combined the principle of Catholicism with the principle of one sanctifying church, as well as tolerance with intolerance. It is a world in itself. Infinite diversity flows together, and this colorful picture gives it its irresistible charm. A country has seldom produced so many different kinds of people as the Catholic Church, with admirable power. It has understood how to maintain unity in diversity, to gain the love and respect of the masses, and to foster a strong sense of community. But it is exactly because of this greatness that we have serious reservations. And I want to say right here that Dr. Turner Hartfield, he's been involved in the National Baptist Convention, assistant to the Dean's Office in Nashville, Tennessee, here in Flint, Michigan at the Macedonia Baptist Church. It's about a 90-year-old church up by Beecher High School, Coldwater Road and North Saginaw Street. And he said before they picked Pope Francis to be the Pope, that there was an African man that was supposed to have got to be Pope that didn't get it, and they gave it to Pope Francis instead. And Dr. Hartfield is in the know when it comes to religious stuff. So I just threw that in. Has this world of the Catholic Church really remained the Church of Christ? Has it not perhaps become an obstruction blocking the path to God the Father instead of a road sign on the path to God? Has it not blocked the only path to salvation? Yet no one can ever obstruct the way to God. The church still has the Bible, and as long as she has it, we can still believe in the holy Christian church. The Father's word will never be denied. Isaiah 55, verse 11. whether it be preached by us or by our sister church. We adhere to the same confession, says Bonhoeffer, of faith. We pray the same Lord's Prayer, and we share some of the same ancient rites. This binds us together, and as far as we are concerned, we would like to live in peace with our disparate sister. We do not, however, want to deny anything that we have recognized as Father's Word, the Father's Word. The designation Catholic, remember what Jesus said, my Father is greater than I, the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, the Holy Trinity, the Father's Word, the Logos. And there's only two eternal things in the whole universe, and that's the Father's Word and the souls of men, women, and boys and girls. The designation Catholic or Protestant is unimportant. The important thing is the Father's Word. Conversely, we will never violate anyone else's faith. The Father does not desire reluctant service, and He has given everyone a conscience. We can and should desire that our sister church search its soul and concentrate on nothing but the Word. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 12 through 13.
1 minute, Richard.
Okay, in the last minute, I'll tie Dietrich Bonhoeffer's words up concerning the Catholic Church. Until that time, he wrote a short paper for the younger boys and girls studying theology in Nazi Germany underground. He said, until that time, we must have patience. We will have to endure it when the false darkness and doctrines are around us and affecting us. The only holy church pronounces upon the church at Rome an anathema. The true authentic Church of Christ has to pronounce an anathema or a condemnation upon their disparate sister, the Roman Catholic Church. She doesn't know any better, and she doesn't hate the heretic, only the heresy. Rome thinks that the Protestants are heretics, schismatic brethren. As long as we let the Father's Word be our only armor, we can look confidently into the future. And then if you can get back with me in the November session, I will at the beginning wish you all a happy Thanksgiving that's coming up. And don't forget Reformation Day, October 31st. Happy Reformation Day, brothers and sisters. And then I'll see you next month, November, and I'll be wishing you, before I get into church history then on the program, happy Thanksgiving. And guess what's right around the corner? Christmas. And we're going to remember baby Jesus in Bethlehem. Oh, I can't wait. Well, this is Dr. Richard Allinger saying goodbye, friends, and happy Reformation Day.
Only on public access.